In this video, we're going to learn how to use the Context API built into SolidJS. This is a global state management system that a lot of SolidJS developers don't know about. It makes managing your global state super simple, and I highly suggest you watch this entire video. If you're using TypeScript with SolidJS and you follow the instructions for context on the SolidJS website, you'll end up with some errors. Everything will still work, but TypeScript will give you some annoying errors. In this video, I'll show you how to use context with TypeScript and make all of the errors go away. Let's get started. This is a SolidJS project I built in another video. You should see it pop up on the screen. That's a tutorial that goes in depth into how to use SolidJS. If this is your first time using SolidJS, I highly recommend you watch that video. In the source folder, I'm going to create a folder called Global Context. Within there, I'm going to create a store file. So the first thing you'll want to do is import some things, and I'll explain what all of these are in a little bit, but you'll want to import what's called an accessor, setter, create context, use context, and create signal. Under that, we're going to create an interface. We're going to call it context props. We're just going to have a count and a page name. We're going to be using create signal, which has both an accessor and a setter. If you're used to React hooks, the first value in the array is the accessor. The second value is the setter. So for count, I'm going to say accessor number, delete that. Then I'll say set count. This is a setter number, and I'll have a page name. Again, this is an accessor, but we're going to make it a string, and then set page name, setter string. We'll get back to these values in a second. The next part is we're going to create a const called global context equals create context. And here is where we're going to use our context props and just trigger that. And you can just leave this empty. Next, we're going to say export function global context provider, say props. Within that function, this is where we're going to use create signal. Again, if you're used to React hooks, this is sort of like use state. So I'm going to say const count set count equals create signal, and I'll give it a default value of 0. Then I'll say const page name set page name equals create signal, and I'll give that a default value of an empty string. Then I'm going to return within here. This is where we're going to create our provider. So I'll say global context. So to create your provider, you just say global context, which is this right here, this variable we just created, dot provider. And then you say value, put an object within here, and we'll just go ahead and put these values that we created within the value. Close out that tag. Within there, put curly braces and say props.children. There will be this little error here because it has an implicit value type of any, but you can just ignore that. All right, and the last thing you have to do to create context is export const use global context. Make that an arrow function, and then say use context, and within there, say global context. Oh, and I forgot, at the end of this use context, you're going to want to make sure to put an exclamation mark. The reason is if you do not do this, it will show errors on the different screens. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. The next thing you'll want to do is within your source file, go to the index.tsx file where your app is located. Here is where you'll import the global context provider. Wrap the global context provider around the app. So put the app inside of the global context provider. Now your global context, your store, is accessible on all of your pages. So let's go to our home page, which again, we created in the SolidJS tutorial video. And if you haven't watched that yet, you can find the code in the description below. So here, let's import use global context from our global context store. And now the way you access all the values within your context is in your function at the top. you can deconstruct the values. So I want all of them: count, set count, page name, set page name. And then you can say use global context. I'm going to use a create effect. Within here, I'm going to set the count to 1, and I'll set the page name to home. All right, and let's go to our website to make sure it's working. And as you can see, it is in my return statement for the home screen. I say this is the page name page, this is the count, and I updated the count and the page name in the create effect, and it's showing up on the screen. Now, just to make sure this can be accessed from other pages, on the users page, let's import again this use global context from the global context store. And here we'll just deconstruct the page name from the use global context. And then down here, I wrote out a sentence. The previous page name was page name. So let's go to the users page and see if it worked. And it did. The previous page name was home. I put the code to this in the description below. You'll want to make sure you set up your context exactly this way. If you don't do it this way, you'll get little red lines under your variables. You'll get a lot of different errors. But if you set it up this way, you shouldn't get any errors when using the global context API built into SolidJS. And one last thing, just to show you what happens if you go back to your store and you take out this exclamation mark and then you go back to your screens, you'll notice there's errors that pop up with your variables with TypeScript. Everything will still work fine, but these errors are kind of annoying. So if you go to the store and put the exclamation mark there, it makes those errors go away. So that's why you want to make sure to put an exclamation mark after your use context in your store page. That is how you use the context API built into SolidJS. Please share this video on social media. SolidJS is still kind of new. A lot of developers don't know about the context API. This video should help a lot of other SolidJS developers, since the context API was designed for global state management with SolidJS. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon if you'd like to see more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.